expected, the cover was monochrome, matte white with scratchy black webs covering its corners, and in the middle of the cover, half written, half carved in a childlike hand, was the title, A Guest for Mr. Spider. On the back cover there was no blurb, just a crudely sketched image of what I assumed to be the eponymous Mr. Spider. He stood upright on his spindly black legs, attached to a disproportionately swollen abdomen. The rest of his legs were splayed at odd angles as though in the middle of some sort of dance, and his head had no mouth, but was covered asymmetrically with 8 eyes of all shapes and sizes. On the top of it there sat a small bowler hat, which had been drawn in a splash of red ink, unlike the black and white which made up the rest of the image. Starts with a blank room in a simple house, almost entirely bare save for a small table with a pot of flowers on it and 2 doors. The flowers are drooping in a way that might just be a poor rendering of bluebells, but with the black and white it just makes them look sick. In the center of the room stands the figure I take to be Mr. Spider. His arms are still splayed wildly, and his back is turned to the reader. He is staring, it seems, at the door on the left. On the next page the image is identical, save that the arms are now in different places. The third and the fourth are the same again. There is no text on any of them. Then, on page 5, the words, "Knock, knock," appear next to the door in the same style as the words of the title. Mr. Spider's arms are suddenly straight and still by his side. The text comes again. "Who is it, Mr. Spider?" The door opens, and stood there is a thin, scrawny-looking fly clutching a box. It is crudely dressed in an ill-fitting suit. It is hard to tell from the fly's face, but his attitude seems to be one of trepidation or anxiety. "It's Mr. Bluebottle," the text reads, "and he's brought you a cake." The next page is a close-up rendering of a large slice of cake in a box. It does have colour, but it's a pale green that makes me think of disease. Then comes a page showing the insectoid face of Mr. Bluebottle, the worry now stark, etched there. Then there is a page with no picture at all, just the words, "Mr. Spider doesn't like it." Then the book returns to the room. Both doors are once again closed. The only difference between this image and the one on the very first page is the ink that seems to have been spilled on the lower half of the right-hand door. There are several more pages of Mr. Spider waiting, his arms a windmill of activity. Then another knock, knock on the left door, and Mr. Spider goes rigid. "Who is it, Mr. Spider?" In that position it's clear his belly is even larger than it was before. The door opens on another fly, this one slightly larger, wearing a pale yellow dress. "It's Mrs. Fruit," the book announces, "and she's brought you some flowers." The flowers on the next page look even less healthy than the ones on the table and are coloured with a gentle pink. A close-up on her face, frozen in stark fear. "Mr. Spider doesn't eat flowers," the next page announces, and Mrs. Fruit is gone, the door closed again. The right-hand door is more noticeably stained now. The once black ink now seems like a dark, crusty brown at the hinges and the seams. The flowers brought by the doomed fruit fly now stand on the table, but they are more clearly wilted and stained a deep, vivid red. Mr. Spider's abdomen is engorged and straining, and where his mouth would be is marked by the same dried brown as the door. His arms are moving once again. On the messier page, with more colour to contrast it, I can see that his hands aren't empty, but are weaving and pulling on thin grey threads that stretch all around the room and out through the cracks in both doors. Knock, knock. "Who is it, Mr. Spider?" Behind the door stands a large, burly fly, this one dressed in baggy overalls. Next to it stands a much smaller fly, dressed in what appears to be a child's version of those same overalls. They are both openly weeping. It's Mr. Horse, and he's brought you his son. The close-up on that fly's face is an image that still comes to me when I'm having trouble sleeping. Then the text, Mr. Spider wants more. When we go back to the picture of the empty parlor, it's smeared all over with dark reds and browns. Mr. Spider's abdomen now dwarfs the rest of him and seeps a sticky red along with the now clearly visible grey thread. He has turned to face the reader, staring into me as his arms move and move and move. The second to last page shows the right-hand door up close, the stains and the ink seeping from the edges. It looks like it has a cutaway panel that can be opened onto the final page. Mr. Spider wants another guest for dinner, it reads. It is polite to knock.